thank you for being here. So we've seen there's a lot going on in digital health, and we need to get innovation into the system and actually to the patient. But maybe one step back, and I would like to start with you, Mrs. Fiedler. Can you tell us how digitization is changing the core business of MSD and what's going on right now?
Well, it's actually changing the business from starting with research, ending with patient engagement. And I think the biggest progress so far, the biggest changes have happened in research, development and manufacturing. And the biggest gap we have as a pharmaceutical industry is still with engagement of our customers and particularly patients.
That's the biggest challenge. So if we think about the patients, how do you at the Bayer Innovation Hub find new ways to engage with patients, maybe? How big is that a challenge?
Well, overall you have an increasing amount of technology that is all around us. You have sensors in all of your areas of your life, and there's just an expectation by people, not only patients, even people that are still healthy, that you use these technologies also to deal with your health. And so the areas that we are looking at using this technology are to help people to stay healthy. And there's somebody said, we don't really have a health care system today. We actually have a sick care system. Somebody gets sick and then you deal with it. And so we are looking a lot into how can we use this technology to work on prediction, helping people to stay healthy, and then ultimately maybe selling them a pill. But we are actually looking at all of the entire stay healthy space using technology there.
Can you give us some examples of the innovations you are hunting for in Silicon Valley?
She's gonna steal it,
Okay.
No. So, one thing that we are looking at right now, for example, is that we have a continuous information flow that you use in order to assess your health. And when you look at your health at your smartphone, people open their smartphone in average 80 times per day to look at their email and stuff. So you have this front-facing camera, and so we are using that in order to take a snapshot of your face that gives you some sort of indication of whether your health is actually going up or down. It's not super accurate, and the smartphone is obviously not a medical device, but it gives you a trend. And by means of that, you can take additional measures and tests eventually.
So
that's one idea.
That's an interesting example of a completely new approach to a very highly regulated healthcare sector, just using your smartphone. But Baher, maybe you can quickly tell us as well what kind of innovations in healthcare you're working on at Medicus.
What we're doing is we're trying to demystify the topic of health, because the health is two things that happen within your body and then your experience with the system. The system is a broker of information. They analyze the information, they produce the information, and you just receive that output. What we'll do is we're trying to take this process of taking the numbers and the complexity of the system and turn it into simple insights, actionable recommendations, and next steps and coaching. This supports I wouldn't say that even the patient, everyone, to stay healthy, or if there's something wrong, that they can recover quickly. And it also supports the system in providing a better experience, whether it's a medical device, whether it's a pharma company, and everyone. The challenge for startups, if I may talk on behalf of startups, is different than the challenge of corporates. The challenge of startups is they can build products and experiences that patients like and engage with, but the problem is accessibility. How do we get to the patient or the end user? Next one is the monetization and reimbursement. Who is going to pay the startups? Because this is very complex and it's different from one region and one country to the next.
So there you opened up a lot of topics, actually, which is really interesting. I'm pretty sure you also, you sort of, let's start with one aspect, the difference in the regions. And you are also working in Germany and Austria, but originally, and in France right now. So you didn't go to the Silicon Valley, but you are in Silicon Valley. So what makes it so special for Bayer to work there?
So when you look at the digital health space, you have one really huge challenge, and I'm not sure we, as a healthcare industry, we still have we already have managed to address it. You basically have two fundamental, very different industries or know-how areas that need to come together. You know, you have like technology and you have the medical space. People in both areas, they get different education, they have different mindsets, very different business model, very different risk areas. And so as Bayer, we have, of course, a lot of know-how in the medical space and regulatory. We know how to do this. You know, the company is over 150 years old. But now we need to bring together this technology side, and we just don't have that know-how in the company. And building it up would be very, very hard, and we're not intending to do that. We are intending to build up some of it, but not all of it. And so the reason for installing a team in Silicon Valley, which I started to put that in place about 3.5 years ago, has the intent to leverage all the development and the know-how that exists over there in the technology space. And so we are working with large and small technology companies in Silicon Valley. In order to do that, you need to be there, you need to be on the ground, and you need to build relationships, and you need to be in Silicon Valley.
So it's the combination between technology and the medical and pharmaceutical expertise. How do you experience this change at MSD? Is the innovation driven by the IT guys or the pharmaceutical experts, or?
I think there's a place for both, and both various aspects or areas have to work closely together. I think digital cannot be something that can be only owned by one functional area. You can only be successful if you really bring all this knowledge, know-how, also the appetite for taking risk together. So collaboration is already very critical, has always been, but will be even more so in the future. Also collaboration with external partners is absolutely critical. But I also want to make the point again, when I said at the beginning that research and development, digital transformation has had already a huge impact on that. I think we should not underestimate what has happened already, because when you try to, our core business is providing innovative medicines and vaccines, and in order to do so, we have now access to much broader data. We can process the data much quicker than we did in the past. And we have also access now to research, which we haven't in the past. So I think that's also something where digital transformation has a huge impact to the benefit of the patient, because patients get faster access to these medicines and vaccines, and they will improve over time as well from a quality perspective.
So these digital innovations, these digital technologies already start driving the innovations.
Yes, definitely.
And what is your experience in terms of the culture working with, incorporating more technology into the core business? How are the cultural barriers?
Well, the culture of a traditional pharmaceutical company is very different from small business and startup companies for sure, because for high-end drug development, you need a certain infrastructure, you need the financial investment, you need resources, and you need large companies. They have their benefit in some aspects, but I think the beauty is really to working with partners who are smaller and more agile. But we as a pharmaceutical industry also need to become more agile and more flexible and adaptable to new things, for sure.
How is your experience with Silicon Valley? Has it completely turned you into a digital enthusiast, and you now can't you don't speak the same language anymore as your colleagues in the labs?
Well, that's why they make me fly over every 6 weeks, just to make sure that I still speak the same language. Like I said, we are working with the small companies over there, but also with the big ones. And when you look at a company like Google or Apple or Cisco or SAP, they also are huge companies. Some of them are bigger than Bayer is, right? And so even though they started off and they're much younger as a company, their company culture also changed significantly. And it's kind of funny to see, because when you talk to employees over there, they say, well, I still remember 10 years ago, it used to be like a startup, and now we have all these processes, and they kind of like, you almost see like they're aligning more and more to a traditional corporate like Bayer is. But at the same time, in the digital space, you just have a very different business that's in the background. It's very fast. When you look at a smartphone, and there's a new smartphone version every year, and for us it takes like 12 years to develop a drug, and it takes billions to do it, and we have like very small percentage of drugs that actually make it to the market. We just don't have this culture in our system and this possibility to say, hey, let's launch a drug, and if it doesn't work, we send out a new software version. You just can't do that. And bringing those two together so that they're complementary, that's going to be continue to be a challenge, and it's not just only a language thing. It's really finding the right middle ground to leverage the technology in the pharmaceutical space.
Baher, how do you perceive this as a startup that sees itself probably more on the technology side than pharma companies would see themselves? How do you experience this? Well, is the bridge stable, and can you make it over the bridge to actually properly work with them to create these innovations together?
I think, first of all, all of us in the healthcare, I think we're on an exploration and still at the beginning of the journey. We're trying to explore the extent of the businesses, because the companies like us, they build products and then they turn them into businesses. Now I would say, collectively, globally, we're at the phase where we're beyond the product part, we're more into the business part, because both startups and corporates, I see corporates doing a lot of corporate programs, corporate ventures, and startups engaging with them globally, especially in Europe over the past 18 months. So far, I haven't seen a lot of, and this is what I was discussing backstage, I haven't seen a lot of success stories. We've participated, me and my team, in a few of those programs, and we felt that this program was done for two main reasons. The first one is PR, for the corporates to say that they're innovative and to talk about how cool they are because they're working with startups. And the other one is to flirt with innovation by getting some of their high executives to talk and engage with startups. So it's like, okay, let's see what this innovation thing is about. Maybe there is something in it. But I don't think they have a clear objective and agenda. And this is what I try to ask any corporate that has such program, which is what I asked Mr. Dirk said. What is your agenda? What is your objective? What do you want to get out of it? Do you want to build products? Do you want to collaborate with startups? What type of collaboration it is? Would you swallow the startup? Because this is something that we always see, is that startups always are expected to adhere to the corporate's objective or main product line, and sometimes we don't, because startups, by their nature, they're agile and they pivot and change direction quickly, not just based on what they desire, based on the market reaction, on the end users' feedback. So we need this flexibility, and we're not sure if corporates can support this flexibility.
Well, that was a question kind of directed to both of you, I guess. So flirting with startups and innovation?
I have a pretty good understanding of what startups needs and what they can and what they cannot do. And I'm trying to play a role also where I translate some of the kind of pitches and some of the information that I receive from startups, in particular in Silicon Valley, try to, translate it into the same language for my colleagues back in headquarters, so that they understand what is actually really there and what the startups want. At the same time, just talking about timing, a lot of startups, they calculate like, okay, what's our run rate? We have 9 more months of budget, or 4 more months rather, right? And then the decision-making processes take a long time sometimes at our companies, right? And so I'm trying to also then help with that, so that we kind of like curate already what kind of areas are we really interested, what kind of areas do we really want to cooperate on or invest into. What are areas where we just, want to take a look at it, but we are not really that keen on really doing something there. And so if you narrow that down, you can actually then speed up the decision-making process and really come to something that is tangible. Because at the end of the day, it's not sufficient to just say, oh, we have a team out there in Silicon Valley. There needs to be some tangible results as well.
If I may sorry, if I may follow up on Dirk's comment, so you're saying is you're also exploring and figuring things out with startups, right? You're trying to mediate between the startup world and their expectations,
Yeah.
their requirements.
And you know, in our case, there's even an additional component, which is the American versus German culture. You know, the Americans, is especially in Silicon Valley, there's like everybody who lives there, and when they pitch to a VC, a local VC there, they know already, okay, he told me that, so I just take 50% out of that, and that's the reality. You know, and then when you compare that with a German culture where everything is still a lot more accurate, you know, precise, proven, and so, you know, when you bring these two cultures together and let them talk to each other, a startup and a German corporate, oftentimes they just can't get together and they don't see where there's actually the area of overlap, and that's where there's some mediation needed.
Yeah, I think there are actually two sides to the coin. I mean, yeah, there are the startups that are probably struggling, but I guess sort of from the perspective of a large corporate that has a core business in a very highly regulated field, you sort of have issues to deal with as well. And I mean, I don't know how many startups you meet per month or per week, but
probably not enough, that's for sure. I think that in the future it can only work together. We need to establish in our big companies more diversity in all aspects, and probably also by bringing people from other industries more and more in from different sizes of companies, so that we have a better understanding for each other. I think pharma knows that they will be forced to do something different in the future. They will become more health service providers, information on top of vaccines and products and medicines. But I don't think we necessarily know already how to get there. So for us, it's a lot of trial and error, and I understand then that it can be frustrating for smaller companies when we try and error, and then you have the feeling we don't have clear objectives. But I think the only solution to that is really to working on this together, and really from our perspective as companies to become more diverse and to integrate different industries, aspects, backgrounds, perspectives into our work. Because we can't afford to do the same old forever, because we will be forced to do something different. It's better if we drive it.
and it's already happening.
It's already happening,
told.
yes.
It's not gonna be
Yeah.
stopped anytime soon. I mean, I think that's there you brought up a very interesting point. So who's also the kind of people for your companies and startups and their teams? So who's driving these changes? You've sort of talked about it a little bit. Are you hiring only data scientists at Bayer now? And are you getting rid of the, I don't know, older pharmaceutical colleagues? I mean, sorry for that provocative question, but
No, but it's a very good point.
I don't know.
So when I set up that center over there, I was actually, before that, I was running a startup for 4 years, and so I had a pretty good idea of what Silicon Valley looks like. And I made a proposal to our senior management to build up a team there. I said, you know, we need to get into digital health. Everybody else is doing it. This is a really hot space. It's not only a wellness game. It's like actually for real. It's really helping with healthcare. And to my surprise, they said, yeah, do it, right? And I was like, oh my God, what did I get myself into? And then I spent a lot of time talking to many people in the organization in order to figure out who are the people that can actually step a little bit outside of their comfort zone and take a little bit of a risk and look after new areas. You can't really put that into the KPIs of people. They have to have somehow their heart and their interest into doing something like that. And then you identify those people in the organization, and it's not necessarily always their job to do that. I mean, everybody says, yeah, I'm working on innovation, but at the end of the day, you need to find the people that are really willing to be a change maker. And then you work with those, and that actually works quite well.
Yeah, so you need those people with a different mindset that are ready for change, and you also need the tech expertise, or are you trying to get that through cooperations with startups or tech companies rather?
Both, I guess, a mixture. And we also need people from other industries who are much more ahead than we are, because as a pharmaceutical industry, we were not the pioneers in digital transformation, but there are others we can learn from. So it moves away from the traditional scientist-based organizations to much, much more diversity in skills and capabilities. So.
There is another point that I've also noticed when working with corporates, which is having multiple stakeholders internally and not knowing who's really can have the right pull with the management to get something done, because you would spend, and this is something that we've experienced, it's all based on real pain and real feedback. We spend a lot of time working with, for example, the head of innovation at some corporates, and then towards the end we just realized that this head of innovation is not really aligned with the CEO and the board. And they're just basically wasting our time and making promises they cannot meet and keep, which is also something that, this is why when I mentioned your comment, because I felt that corporates are still figuring it out. Most of them don't have a proper strategy and right strategy to approach it. They have the right aim in mind. They know that digital innovation, patient-centered experience is important. They're going towards it, but they don't have strategy. They don't have clear objectives. They're not aligned in the management. I think they're just like, there's one person who convinced someone from the board or the CEO, and for them it's like this small toy project. It's like, okay, let's see what they can come up with. But when it comes to getting signatures or getting something done, people started hesitating and they started bringing up obstacles. And it's not just me. I think many startups can talk about their experience with corporates. We always face this. So what I always caution startups that mention to me that they're working with these corporates, that be wary of these things. And I mentioned that make sure the management is aligned, make sure they have the right objectives, make sure that there is no cultural clash between what you're working on and your main objective and their objective, and then take it from there. And don't treat it, because with startups really struggle. In healthcare, I've been working in so many industries. Healthcare is the toughest industry by far that I've ever worked with. So startups really struggle in healthcare. At some point, they become really desperate, and I'm sure you've seen this. They're desperate to a level that if a corporate comes in with this program, they think this is it. It's going to save them. So that they invest everything in it, and then if it doesn't work out, they're just like either bankrupt or emotionally deep down dead.
So that was an advice to startups, but what would be the advice for corporates? I mean, you are complaining, but what should they do?
I mean, the guys can talk more about this. For me, I just see it from the side of the startups, but if I can just extrapolate what would work, which is making sure everyone is aligned from the internal management and the board, whoever is involved, even at the CFO level. And recently we started catering to the CFO, building in our deck and proposition things for the CFO to like. Because at the end of the day, the CFO would say, that's a good investment, that's a bad investment. For them, innovation is just a buzzword. They don't even live in the world we live in. They live in the world of Excel sheets and profit and loss. For them, they want to see the numbers at the end. And this is something that corporates can help startups. I mean, we've been lucky to work with a lot of people in the innovation department that help us focus our proposition, not take innovation out of it, but just show the numbers, focus on the return on investment.
Yeah, so we are back to what you mentioned, the whole, like what you are doing, translate and speak the right languages and convey the right information to the right players.
So I'd like to comment to what you just said, because you have to put yourself into the shoes of the people that have been, a long time with the company and are, in this senior decision maker positions, and their background is in medical. They're pharmacists, they're chemists, maybe. None of them is an IT person or is a software person or so. And suddenly you give them ideas that require knowledge and know-how and understanding of technologies that maybe at best they are hobby programmer at home, but most of the time they are not, I can assure you. And so that's why oftentimes they don't feel that comfortable taking decisions there, and it takes longer than it should. The other thing is that the startup culture is also, in particular in Germany, it's getting better and better, but it's hard to embrace that and understand it. And We did actually launch 5 years ago a program called Grants for Apps here in Berlin, where we are trying, part of it, at least part of the objective is to also bring together that startup culture with the corporate culture. And so what we do is we have a part of the Bayer building in Müllerstraße. You know, it's like if you've ever been there, you know, it's like, you know, it's a huge campus and it looks kind of old. I mean, they're actually renovating it right now. But overall, almost when you walk into the building, you feel like, okay, this is like, you know, older kind of building and culture. And now we are moving in the startups into that building. So all they have to do to meet with the startups or the decision makers is press a button on an elevator, and here you are in the same building. And that actually helped tremendously. And then we have you know, big events where we invite everybody, the startups pitches, and that actually triggered some culture change. It's of course little steps, but we're getting there.
Yeah, because we're running out of time, but for all of you who are interested in continuing the discussion with us, we'll be at the Meet the Speakers area afterwards. But one last question, because I guess that you as in a management position, I'm pretty sure that you experience all these kind of struggles. And so maybe as a very last question, has it become much harder to become a manager in times of digital transformation
Well, it's harder.
in your sector?
I guess it's harder to be a manager in a very dynamic, complex world, and digital is contributing to that. But there are other areas that are much more challenging than digital. I just think we've always had as manager, we have the obligation to make sure we ensure collaboration, bring out the best in our teams, and have diverse teams. And that is with digital even more important than ever.
That sounds like a good closing remark. And I thank you very much for the discussion. Short but intense. Startups and corporates still have to continue the discussion, and there's some issues to solve, right? But thank you very much. It was a pleasure having you here.